Welcome and get ready for a front row seat on Icons with Ava Johanna, the live show that is raising the bar in the entertainment space worldwide. You're about to be right in the middle of heart-pounding conversations and real-time connection that ignite transformation within. Our global live show stars the industry's powerhouses, visionaries, and cultural icons. Together, we'll walk the path of legendary entrepreneurs, influential business moguls, celebrities, and iconic brand architects. Join the conversation, seize the opportunity to engage directly with icons of their industries, and immerse yourself in an unparalleled learning experience. Icons isn't just a show. It's an opportunity to step into the minds and hearts of industry leaders and run with their advice. So grab your popcorn because this is the space where icons are born. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Icons with Ava Johanna. Today we have Chef Whitney Aronoff on the podcast. And y'all, you know that there are sometimes episodes that come about where I am like, I selfishly have a lot of questions because if I'm being totally honest, I'm gonna take some accountability and responsibility here. Taking care of myself from a nutritional standpoint as a female entrepreneur has not always been my strongest suit. I feel like it is very easy for me to forget to eat, to just get so wrapped up in my work. And I've noticed really, especially over the last 2 years, that it has taken a toll on my performance, on my energy levels, on how I feel at the end of the day when I'm actually closing my laptop and able to connect with my partner. And if you are like me, then you do not settle for less than extraordinary in every single area of your life. And that is why I'm so excited that Whitney is joining us on the podcast today. She is the host of the High Vibration Living podcast, but not only that, she is the founder of Starseed Kitchen. She is a incredible chef that really focuses on high vibration foods. She's based out of California and she works with high performers, athletes, celebrities to nourish their bodies because the importance of that nourishment is really what allows their performance to soar. So, Whitney, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Welcome.
My pleasure. I'm so excited to get into all your questions about food and health and how that affects performance. So I'm ready.
Yeah. Okay. So I told you before we hopped on, I always need to know like the hero's journey and where you started versus where you are now, because I think that where we start has such a big influence on our thought process, our perspective, our drive, and also the lessons that we are meant to learn and how we can take those lessons and incorporate it into the service that we provide to the people that really need our work. So I'm curious, how did you get into this space? Tell me your story. Give me the cliff notes. I'm dying to know.
Yeah, so I used to be an HR manager and corporate recruiter. I never thought that in my 30s I'd be going back to school, to culinary school, to become a chef. But when I was in high school, every night before I went to bed, I would start to have stomach pain in a specific spot, on the lower right side. And I couldn't figure out what was causing it. I've always been a healthy eater. Steamed broccoli florets have always been like my favorite vegetable. And so I'd go to like my general practitioner and ask, why am I having these stomach pains? And he would say, well, you should eat more broccoli, without even asking me what my current diet is. And so it was just night after night of having these stomach pains and never getting any answers. And then feeling like I went off to college and not really knowing how to eat and navigate cafeteria and college food and college life. And then in my 20s, and as a woman, your body's constantly changing every few years. And so is your environment as you're figuring out your life and your career. And I just didn't feel like I could navigate that. I didn't feel like I had the tools really to understand how to nourish my body, how to manage my weight, how to wake up feeling good and consistent every day in my being. And then understanding that weird stomach pain that would just continually come back and forth throughout my life. And so I just got so frustrated with spending thousands of dollars to going to all these practitioners all over the US and never getting to the root cause of inflammation in my body, stomach pains, weight gain, weight loss. So I decided that you know what, I'm here in my physical body. I know what I'm experiencing. If I could have just as many classes with a registered dietitian as I could with chefs that taught me old school traditional ways of preparing the food, because maybe I'm preparing the food properly, like improperly. Maybe like I really don't know the right techniques, or I'm not balancing my plate right. Like there has to be something that I'm missing that I don't know that I can't get from a book. So I decided to go to culinary school to learn how to really deeply nourish myself, because I thought if I can do it for myself, then I can really tackle anything in life. And then through that process of gaining all that knowledge is when I realized we can't just heal the physical body through food. It's a physical, spiritual, mental, you know, and esoteric body that we're dealing with. So sometimes what we're going through doesn't have to be the food. It has to do with emotions and other things that we're carrying and holding on to. And that we really have to reevaluate how we look at our body and kind of pick ourselves apart, because it's not always the choices that we're making. Sometimes it's our environment. Sometimes it's what we're holding in. Sometimes it happens to be what's going on astrologically. It's so layered. But we have to understand how to nourish ourselves and get that foundation right. And then everything else kind of falls into place, and we can figure those other things out as they're happening.
Okay, so I'm so curious, as you were starting to learn about like food preparation and just like the importance of nourishing yourself, not just through the food that you're eating, but in all the different domains, mental, physical, emotional, spiritual. Did you notice any like big shifts that happened almost instantaneously, or was it a little bit of a slow burn for you and starting to, with the stomach problems, start to have that go away or inflammation go away? Because sometimes I feel like we're set up to expect instantaneous results because of the world that we live in and how instantaneous so much of the world is, whether it's the medication that we're taking or it's the apps that we're using, or connecting to the internet. And I know for me, when I started dealing with gut health problems and had really bad cystic acne in my 20s, it was really challenging to be patient with
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of the different changes that I was making. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I feel like when you start a new habit, give yourself 30 days for it to become easy and flow. The first 30 days, you're going to always feel resistant. So, if you're changing the way that you start preparing meals at home, if you're changing your habits of where you're grocery shopping, give yourself 30 days to get out of that ick. But then it's the 90-day marker where you're really going to start to see changes. That's when you start to hear other people making comments about how you've changed in a good way, and they notice it when you show up, but you're also going to see it within yourself. But when I was in culinary school, I also did experiments on myself. So we'd be learning this different information, but then I wanted to see if it could really apply to me. So one of the things was chicken, right? Most women always eat chicken breast. That's the part that we're always told is the healthiest for us, the least amount of fat. That's what's going to make us skinny. And I worked with the chef that runs all the dig in restaurants in New York City. And he explained to me that when we look at the part of the meat that we're going to eat, we want to look at the animal, and then we want to break down what part of that animal worked the hardest, the legs, the thighs, the butt, like what moved the most on the animal and exerted the most energy, because then we're going to get the most energy from that when we eat it. And the whole point of eating is one, pleasure and joy and connection with other people, but two, like energy. We're looking for an energy transfer. So how can I get the biggest bang for my buck? So I decided when we were doing poultry week to only eat the dark meat, to only eat the chicken thigh, to eat the leg, see how different I could feel if I only went for that dark meat. And I had so much more energy instantaneously.
Wow.
Instantaneously, I noticed a huge difference when I ate the dark meat for lunch and dinner. And just every day, it was like I was stacking the amount of energy in my body. It was refueling me in a way that I hadn't felt fueled in a really long time. So that stuck with me. It's also like, how we prepare our grains. Most people don't wash their rice. Like they've never heard of washing the rice or washing their quinoa. And that makes a huge difference in how you feel, whether or not you can bounce back after you have a meal, or if you want to go lay on the couch or crawl into bed or watch a movie. We should feel good after we eat. Like if we think about vacations in Europe, we all go walking and window shopping after we have a meal. So we should feel the same way when we're at home. We should have a meal and we should feel good enough to go for a walk around the block. And if we aren't, then like what was in that meal that needs to shift a little bit so we can feel good afterwards.
Okay. One, mind blowing with the chicken
Yeah,
example. And thank God, because I love dark meat over chicken breast. It's just the light meat just doesn't do it for me. It's too dry.
good,
I feel like my mouth is getting dry just thinking about it.
good.
That's awesome though. I never really thought about that. And that's such a good tip for anybody. And I guess that goes for like any type of protein. Just like think about what exerted the most energy and that's going to fuel you the most. Is that
Yeah, so
right?
you can think about that with steaks, right? So the filet mignon is kind of like the chicken breast. It's in a part of the cow that doesn't move very much, and that's why it's such soft meat. But we want the tough cuts of meat, which are actually the cheaper cuts. They just require that we cook them a little differently. So it requires that we braise them. We put them, in a really pretty Le Creuset or Staub pot with some bone broth, and we cook that on the stove or in the oven for 3 or 4 hours, and then it's going to get super soft and be great shredded meat for tacos or for a more nourishing dish. But the tougher cuts of meat are the parts of the animal that worked the hardest, so they require a little different preparation, but it's going to be cheaper, you're going to save money, and you're going to get more energy from it. And I notice a big difference because I tend to cook those meats in the fall and winter time. And that really helps me energy wise when we have less light out and people's energy levels tend to drop. So I move towards eating those tougher cuts of meats. I slow cook them. I add tons of root vegetables so I feel really grounded. And that's what really supports me in the winter time.
Okay. I feel like that's like $1 million tip within itself. I love that so much. So you mentioned, when we're not feeling well, kind of looking back at whatever meals we're eating and dissecting what may have caused that. And I'm curious your take on like elimination diets and like starting to pull things out and add things back in if somebody is experiencing a lot of inflammation or gut health problems. Like is that something that you recommend, or like what's your approach, maybe not on like diet culture overall, but on finding the nutrition style that works best for you?
I love elimination diets, and you don't have to go extreme. You don't need to hire a doctor or a nutritionist, or you don't need to cut everything out and slowly add it back in. You can just cut one thing out and then notice how you feel after a week when you bring it back in, whether that's dairy or eggs or certain nuts. You can play around. But what I also suggest is quality, right? So if you're cutting out dairy, when you add it back in, there's kind of three different versions of dairy in the United States right now. We have raw dairy, we have A2 dairy, which is dairy that comes from a cow that's been genetically tested, and the cow still carries the A2 gene, meaning it is the oldest type of cow that's essentially on our planet that's carrying the A2 casein protein so you can better digest the dairy, if
Okay.
that makes sense. I know
So
it's a
is there like
and,
is
and
there an
it's
A2 on the label or
there's an
like,
A2 on the label.
okay.
Alexander Farms is like one of the big ones talking about it. When you go to Whole Foods, when you go to Mother's Market, when you go to Erewhon, any health food store, you'll see usually 2 or 3 different milk brands that say A2. You'll see butter brands, you'll see yogurt, you'll see cream with the A2 label. So same with cheese. So you want to look for the raw, you want to look for the A2, and then you're going to have just traditional organic dairy, cheese, butters. You kind of want to try each one separately, days apart, at least 3 days apart, because you want to see how your body reacts to each one, because it's going to react a little bit differently. But if you get that sore throat, if you get congestion, if you get phlegm anywhere, then it's just not right for you right now. And I always just say it's not right for you right now because nothing is forever unless you want it to be. So
Mhm.
I think you can heal everything, and it all depends on the quality of what you're eating and what you're eating ate, right? So it's even with vegetables and fruit. If you're having a reaction to something you're eating, it might not be the fruit. It might be the pesticide, herbicide, or insecticide that was sprayed on it. It might be something that was in the soil. It might be something else that was sprayed on it before it got to the market. We're living in a weird time. So there's so many elements. But I always think like you figure out what's causing the inflammation or the sore throat or the stomach ache, and you give yourself a break from it. And then you can see if you can find alternatives if it's truly a food that brings you joy. And sometimes we have to make space for the things that still make us joy, bring us joy, but maybe doesn't work with our body with where we are now. So we have to find kind of substitutions, because I don't believe in eliminating all things that bring us joy. That kind of defeats the human experience, right?
Yeah, 100%. And I feel like the stress that you create and cause on your system from like being too restrictive or, being somewhere and being like, well, I really, really want it, but I'm not going to have it. Like that emotional impact makes such a big difference as well, too, that you might as well have eaten the thing that wasn't good for you. It's interesting. I was just at a bachelorette party in Nashville. And I really have not been called to drink alcohol lately. And
Mm-hmm.
granted, it was very, very hot out, and I did have some like energy drinks to help me keep up with everybody. But I felt like I got hit by a truck when I got home. And I was like, the whole reason I didn't drink alcohol is because I wanted to feel good when I got home. But so much of like the stress that I was causing myself and like the tiredness that I was feeling, and yes, maybe not drinking enough water regardless, still caused me to feel
Yeah.
exactly as I would have. And so it's just so interesting how, like, not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily call that the placebo effect, but just like the impact that that stress, mental and emotional and like spiritual that we put on ourselves has on the body and on our experience.
Yeah, our mindset is so powerful. And I'm not a drinker anymore either. I mean, I've gone years without drinking just simply because I just don't like to feel hungover, and I
Yeah.
like to wake up feeling amazing in my body every day. So, like 6 months ago, I went on a date and I really liked this person. And they were cooking me dinner, which was a huge treat because I'm a chef. And they had a bottle of red wine. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to lighten up. Like, this is my sign to lighten up. Let me just have a glass of wine. Let me just tell my body right now that I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to feel amazing. Like, I'm not getting a hangover. We're not participating in that. I just gave myself this little pep talk. And sure enough, like I woke up the next morning so happy I had that glass of wine, that I lightened up, that I just enjoyed my meal, that I didn't stress about anything. I just stayed super focused on being in the moment, trying a little bit of everything, having like no food issues, no alcohol issues. I just kind of marinated in the joy of getting to have this experience. And I woke up feeling great the next day. So, quality of ingredients is always important, but mindset is just as important. And I've been to a Dr. Joe Dispenza conference, and Dr. Joe talks a lot about people in the spiritual space and their fear of alcohol because they don't want the hangover. They don't want to feel bad the next day. And he says, like, if you hang out with me long enough, you can drink the wine and wake up feeling great the next day. You'll never have a hangover again. It's all mindset. So I think we still have a lot to learn in that space, how we can continue to enjoy life and this human experience while optimizing our body. And it doesn't mean go out and buy the shitty $20 bottle of wine that was made with a bunch of additives, so fermented faster, and the grapes were sprayed with everything you can imagine, and poor quality water. I still think we need to choose quality, traditionally made wines, properly fermented from real non-GMO grapes, all the good stuff. But I think we're gonna find, all of us in our health, wellness, and spiritual space, getting more on the 80-20 rule and being able to enjoy life again while still being able to perform at an optimal level.
Yes. Preaching to the choir. Okay, so the food industry is like, I feel like it's a little bit Wild West though, because we don't really know like what's being
Totally.
sprayed. I feel like labels are used very loosely. So when we talk about like finding the high quality or finding those high vibration foods that you really work with, how do we do that? Especially if, someone is listening to this and they don't have access to an Erewhon. I feel so grateful that Central Market is right down the street from me. I
Yeah,
know that you know Central Market from Dallas.
yeah, totally.
Um, but like the reality is not everybody has the same type of access that we do. And so even if they do have the money to be able to spend. So I'm curious, like, what are the things that we should not look out for as far as stay away from, but what are like the green lights in the grocery store?
Yeah, so like the good, better, best concept is kind of how I flow through the grocery store. And I think I'm like everyone, like I'm on a budget too. I can't just buy anything and everything I want all the time because it just doesn't make sense. So I know I always have a game plan when I go to the grocery store or the farmer's market. I know what I need, but then I'm open-minded to what could be new, seasonal, on sale. You have to be a little bit flexible. So if you're going to pick out your vegetables and for some reason the price is obscene this week, it's because it's not local. So if your asparagus is 6 to 8.99, it's probably not from around here. It's probably being shipped in from Mexico. And I mean, it'll say that. But it's also probably not in season. So the food that's in season and the food that's local will always be a better price. The food that is out of season and is not local is always going to be more expensive because it costs a lot more to get it where it is. And if we're going for energy here, the from when it's picked to when we eat it, it loses energy. So you'll find that when you have an experience to have a farm to table meal, like when you actually get to go to the farm and eat a meal there. So if you're in Cabo and you go to Flora Farms, or if you're in San Juan Capistrano and you're getting to go to the Ecology Center, like whatever experience you're getting to have, that farm to table freshness. So when I cooked a dinner at the Ecology Center in San Juan for 90 people, I had grilled baby turnips on the menu, and they picked them at 2 or 3 in the afternoon. We washed them, we sliced them, we had them on the grill at 6 p.m., and the guests were eating them by 7 p.m. What a transfer of energy those guests are getting. Like
Yeah.
literally it came out of the field hours before they were getting to eat it. So massive amounts of flavor, massive amount of energy transfer. But what happens when you eat food that fresh is you get full faster because there's just so much more nutrient density. And then, we all have had meals where like we go to Trader Joe's or we go to a grocery store where like everything's wrapped in plastic and we prepare a meal. And it's like you can't stop eating because you aren't getting full and you're not ever getting that flavor satiation. And we're
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't understand. Why am I eating so much tonight? Why am I not getting full? Why am I not getting satisfied? Because there's nutrient density that's missing. There's energy that's missing from the meal. So these are like those in they're like this invisible concept of food that you can test and experiment on yourself and you'll see it and feel it, but it's almost like something that can't be explained unless you experiment on yourself.
Okay. I love this so much. And I want,
Sorry, we went way off
yeah.
from the grocery store. But when it comes to what you guys should be looking for, it's seasonality.
Okay.
It's totally seasonality, and then learning to get flexible with your proteins. Because if you're, shopping at Whole Foods, which has, great protein, section and butchers, you'll notice the fish changes all the time and the prices change all the time. Same with the chicken and the beef and the bison and the lamb. And we need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. So we choose different cuts of meat and learn to prepare them in different ways, especially with the bone in. Because when we cook food with bone in, again, just more nutrient density that's going to be going on there. We're not paying extra for the bones, but we're going to get more free collagen, which is what we all really want and we're paying extra for and all these, powders and stuff. But it's really about getting to be more flexible consumer.
Yeah. I feel so grateful that I grew up with a dad that is such a master of the kitchen. He helped Wolfgang Puck open up Spago and Chinois in the 90s. And so he was a server, but of course being around fine dining for so long took
Yes.
a liking to it. And so I am very flexible as far as eating of the food, preparing of the food a little bit less flexible. I usually will call my boyfriend in and be like, all right, it's time for you to cut the raw salmon or to touch the
Yeah.
chicken. Um, okay, so do you
But
recommend then? Oh,
with
go
that
ahead.
in mind, though, with that in mind, when you are buying your salmon, when you're buying your chicken, if you're getting it from a grocery store, not from the spot where it's already prepackaged, but if you're getting it fresh from the counter, you can have them slice and dice things any way you want. So if you're making a chicken stew or a chicken soup, you can have them dice up your chicken breast for you into, 1-inch cubes. You can have them slice up your salmon for you ahead of time. So you can take that off your plate. And I do as a chef, just because there's so much food I'm making in one day. I try to delegate as much as I can to other people. So that way I can be super efficient when I'm in the kitchen. So feel free to have the people behind the counter in the fish and the meat department slice up your meat for you. That's what they're there to do. And they have the better knives to do it too.
I love that. That feels like also like letting, for the most part, the masculine take care of me. I can just like be in my
Yes,
feminine and be like, okay, you can do the cutting for me.
absolutely.
Um, so talk to me about preparing a meal for 90 people. Like, what is the biggest group of people that you've ever cooked for?
Yeah, so 90 people would be the max.
Okay.
And
Talk to me
it's
about that.
Yeah, and it's a lesson in delegation and trust, right? Because it's all about the experience. So I want people to have delicious, flavorful food, but I want them to have a dreamy experience. And so what I try to do as a chef is always put myself in the guest shoes, whether they're my personal chef or I'm cooking a dinner for 90 people on a farm. I try to take a moment to think, if I was in their shoes, what do I want to experience? What do I want to learn? How do I want to feel? What do I want the food to look like? And I romanticize everything as well. So, in order to feed 90 people and for it to be farm to table, so that just requires extra work on the chef's part. Just things have to be washed more. We're cooking outside. It takes extra work. You have to get more volunteers. You have to get more sous chefs. And then you have to figure out what person is going to be right for each dish. So you think about their personality, how detail oriented they are. Is assigning them this dish going to light them up, right? Because I want them to put their joy and happiness into the dish as well. So I'm navigating all that as I build my team. And I also want to make sure that I create a circle of people that want to work together, that want to be there, that want to lift each other up, because that's going to support how the guests are going to feel when they arrive. And then you have to surrender. It's like a whole spiritual experience. It's like delegation, trust, surrender. Um, that's what's happening during the process. And then it's staying super calm and then making sure you have your tools that are going to help you flow through the day with calm and ease and joy and peace. So making sure I sage myself before I show up to where I'm cooking, playing certain vibrational music to help keep me like really grounded and calm, or shifting the music to the vibe that I want people to film. So whatever the theme of the dinner is, I want to get my fellow chefs in that theme mood. Um, Building an extra time to just see what else we can add to the dishes to surprise and delight the guests, making sure that I can go out and connect with the individual guests and see what their experience is like. It's a lot of work. But it's all about, I find, feeling. A lot of
Hmm.
cooking is feeling. It's like when you go to the grocery store and you're trying to figure out which apple to buy, right? You touch a few apples before you figure out which one you're going to take home. It's not necessarily about how it looks. I mean, you're looking to make sure there's no bruises, there's no dents, the coloring's right, but it's a lot about how it feels. And so I really suggest to everyone listening, next time you go to the farmer's market, next time you go to the grocery store, like trust how you feel when it comes to what you're choosing. If you went with the intention to buy broccolini, the broccolini is not looking good, and it doesn't feel like something you should actually go home with today, trust that feeling. And then go through and figure out what is calling to you and trust that your body is reaching for that for a reason. If you're craving chocolate, like trust the craving, but buy a better quality than maybe what you're used to. Look for something with no soy lecithin. See if you can upgrade the quality grade from 55 to 75%, cacao. Like trust the feeling and then see how you can upgrade what you're choosing.
It sounds like you are very different from what I think we kind of stereotypically see in like the kitchen, like we've got the show The Bear, and I've only watched a couple episodes, but that show gives me so much anxiety. Like I
Me
couldn't
too.
watch any. I was like, there's too much tension here.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the environment that you're creating really is what allows for it to be high vibration food. I remember I had Shaman Durek on the podcast
Yeah.
several years ago, and he was sharing a story around how when he was cooking a meal for his family, he's like praying and putting intentions into the brownies and like speaking into the brownies that it's going to make everybody giggle and everybody laugh and feel love. And I just loved that concept and always took it with me because I feel like, you know, especially after a long day working or not having a ton of energy by the time I'm done with my calls, it can kind of just be like a going through the motions thing where even like sitting down to eat is just like going through the motions to sit down and eat. So I'm curious because we do have so many high performer, high achievers that listen to this podcast. For you especially, I mean, you have a busy day, you're cooking for people, you're probably running around. Like, what is a day in the life of your eating look like when you are having long days and have to expend a lot of energy?
Yeah. So I meal prep for myself as well. So I meal prep on Sundays and on Wednesdays. That's when I take inventory of what's in my fridge, what's my body craving, what do I have planned for the week? And that's when I make sure I buy groceries for myself. I prep a few extra things. There's always proteins and starches already prepared in my fridge. So whether they're paleo turkey meatballs, paleo bison meatballs, some, ground beef, some already cooked chicken, there's always something protein wise that's done, hard boiled eggs, and then starch as well. So some short grain brown rice, some roasted sweet potatoes, some roasted carrots, and then I keep a bunch of other things like some sauerkraut, some kimchi, tons of fresh herbs, just things I can easily grab and put a meal together. But I've already kind of laid out in my head what I'm going to be doing for breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the next 3 days, and then reassess. Next 3 days, reassess. That's how I'm able to fuel my body and then show up and do it for other people is I have to plan ahead. So like this morning, I already had the Japanese yam wedges cooked and in the fridge. So I just put a little smashed avocado on top, cooked an egg, and breakfast was ready, easy peasy. And I had some fresh fruit. So it's just always taking inventory and giving yourself twice a week to do so. It's just a habit that I have. And I think it's easier because, I work as a personal chef, but you have to plan your food and your meals just like you plan your calendar. We
Mhm.
all know usually on Thursday what we're doing on Saturday. So I know if it's going to be a beach day. I know if it's going to be a day where I'm running errands. So I know if there's something I need to prep on Friday. So it's easier for me to get out the door on Saturday.
Yeah, I think that that's the piece that I personally am missing is just like really ultimately what it is in the beginning is the discipline, right? To make sure that I have time on my Sunday to go to the grocery store, to think about my meals, to actually sit down and or not sit down, stand up and get into the kitchen and make them. Because I feel so much better when I do, like one of my favorite meal preps is just my egg bakes and loading that with protein. And they're so freaking good and they're so easy to have for, 2 to 3 days after I make them. But it's the discipline of consistently doing that right here and right now, I'm saying for everybody, and you're going to hold me accountable. To just start doing it. So I appreciate you kind of just like sharing how you think about it. And when you talk about like reassessing, do you mean more so like how am I feeling in my body, or like reassessing more so of like, okay, well, what's coming up in the week? What do I want to make? When you're reassessing on a, bi-weekly or twice a week basis, what does that actually look like for you?
Yeah, so it's looking at what's in my fridge, what needs to be
Okay.
used up, what can I better utilize, what's already in my pantry that maybe I've forgotten about. How am I feeling? But what are my plans for the next few days too? So is there something that's coming up where I want to make sure I feel a certain way? Like, do I need more comforting food this week, or do I need to go really light because I'm going to be in a bathing suit on Saturday? So I know I'll feel better if I do like a soup or something really light for dinner on Friday night. So it's kind of everything. But I think it always comes back to how I feel, what's in the fridge, how can we better utilize what's there? And then am I eating too much of one thing? Have I gotten in a rut? Um, are there foods that I haven't tried for a while? Is everything kind of the same color? Do I need to like invoke some new color? And then I also think about a lot is hydration. So when was the last time I had a meal that had a lot of liquid? So that's when I'll turn and make a soup or a stew or a fish curry or a chicken curry that requires for me to put in a lot of liquid like bone broth, because that's a great way to just hydrate the body is through food, not always water, but through the foods that we're eating, getting hydration to the skin and to the intestines that way, I think is really important. And I'm someone that didn't grow up eating a lot of soups and stews. So putting this into my repertoire has been a lot harder. But I notice my body feels really good when I make a really big vegetable packed curry and I can mix up the protein, whether it's fish or chicken, that I always wake up the next day feeling a lot better. So I analyze a lot of different stuff.
Yeah, I love it. So that's you. But on the side of the personal chef, like what are your clients typically eating? Like what are you cooking for your personal chef clients?
So everyone's completely different. So I have a client that likes to eat really paleo. I have a client that's plant-based. I have a client that's traditional American. I have another client that wants to be healthy, but it's kind of traditional American. And then I have, yeah, another client that wants to be healthy, but it's another traditional American. Like everyone eats completely different. And within that, they're constantly navigating what they hear on social media, what they're reading in a magazine, and what's feeling good with them. So I have to be really flexible with the fact that their food preferences are going to change and they're going to try to like roll with different food trends. Whether I believe in what they're following or not, I just have to show up and do the best that I can for what they're asking for and know that they're in their body, they know what works. But I would say, like, for one of my clients who is like the top performer in his industry in finance, he eats paleo. So with a little bit of with healthy starches. So we're always doing lots of really clean protein. So we're doing 100% grass finished steaks. We're doing paleo meatballs, turkey, bison, venison. We're doing chilies with no beans, just tons of veggies and bone broth, lots of curries and soups, a variety of vegetable sides, whether the veggies are cooked or I'm doing like really nice salads, like a kale coleslaw. So a great coleslaw, but add kale to it, cucumber salads, Greek salads, just protein, veggies, and then the starches we're keeping to sweet potatoes, sometimes potatoes, a little bit of rice, parsnips, and that's how they eat is very much how I eat.
Mm.
So it's like walking into Erewhon and going to the hot bar or the cold bar. That's what I try to prepare for them. And I would say their life is a great reflection of what they're eating. They're super healthy, they're gorgeous, they're high performing, they have a really full, happy, packed life. And I know, and they know that the food they eat and the time that they take to restore their body, their exercise routine, their sauna routine, their massage routine, their self-care routine, that allows them to really take advantage of all their days.
Yeah. At what point do you think, like, because sometimes I feel like it's a little bit of like a chicken or the egg or a chicken or the egg conversation of like, okay, all of those things are so important, but when do you add those in versus like before the success happens, before the top performing happens? Because someone could be listening to this right now and be like, I would love to have a personal chef. I'd love to have a masseuse come over to my house. I'd love to sauna every single day.
Totally.
But there's a lot of things that it's like, okay, for a celebrity or a pro athlete, easy because they have the money to be able to do so. But also, I'm a big believer that like some of these things we invest in first, and that's what allows us to get to that level.
I agree. And I think that if you can figure out what works for your body and how to nourish yourself, you can better outsource that job to somebody else. So
Hmm.
until you know how to do it for yourself, it's going to be harder for you to find the right person to do it for you. So if you can learn how to make three amazing meals for yourself that really hit the spot and that they're so great, whether it's breakfast, lunch, or dinner, that you feel confident enough to make that for your significant other. Like, I think everyone, no matter who you are, you need to learn how to cook something and be really proud of it. And it needs to taste good. You need to be able to make it from scratch. And it needs to be something that really makes you feel good, that hits the spot, but you're proud enough to also share with somebody you love. And if you can get three things right, whether breakfast, lunch, or dinner, then I feel like you can kind of do anything in the kitchen. But now you've like really created something for your tool belt, and you can better nourish yourself in a lot of different ways. You don't have to be a chef. These meals don't have to be complicated. Simple's often best, especially for a digestive system. So it can simply be, some grilled chicken thighs and a steamed vegetable and, a baked sweet potato. Like super simple. You can drizzle a little olive oil, salt, and pepper on top. Easy peasy. As you get more comfortable, you can add some fresh herbs. You can then take those fresh herbs with a little garlic and, add a little olive oil and lemon juice and make a sauce. Just like slowly over time, just, continue to add to your repertoire. But it gets to be easy and simple. It doesn't have to be complicated. That doesn't mean it's a better meal or that person's a better chef or a cook. But you got to learn how to do some things yourself first before you give it away.
Yeah. I mean, I feel very grateful that, again, I grew up with my dad, even though he leans into very rich foods. I learned a lot, and I feel like intuitively I can get into the kitchen and play with different ingredients or herbs and be able to create something on the fly. And it's helped to definitely keep things interesting as far as my meals go. I'm curious because if you have a lot of different clients at once, how does your schedule work? Like, are you going to their houses daily? Do you actually shop for them and then prep at your house and bring it over? What does it actually look like a day in your life from like the work side of things?
Yeah, so one client a day. I have one day where I have two clients in one day. But usually it's one client a day. So I have the same client every Sunday, the same clients every Monday, the same clients every Tuesday. And most of my clients I've been with for 7, 8, 9 years. And so on Sunday mornings, I wake up, I enjoy my morning routine. I have my breakfast, my green tea, and then I go straight to the grocery store. So I buy all the groceries the day that I'm cooking. And that's a huge tip that I use for myself is it's really great when you go to the grocery store, you buy everything you need, and then instead of taking the time to come home and put it all away and then pull it all back out to cook it later, you just cook it right away. and it saves you a lot of extra time. It's so much more efficient. So I get to my client's house, I have all the groceries, and immediately I wash all the vegetables, lay them out. And that makes my clients really happy if they're home, just to see like the bounty of all the fresh vegetables. And I have a printed menu. That helps a lot. So if you're really struggling with meal prep, if you just write out a menu, maybe make it special and type it up and print it. I have the printed menu and I just work my way down. And I know where I can multitask and where I just need to focus on one dish. And you just go through and you knock it out. And some days I need to put on some music or a podcast. Other days I just open a window and enjoy the silence. Most of the time when I cook, I always open a window just because I want to let the electromagnetic stagnancy in the kitchen out, right? Because when we're in the kitchen, that we have a refrigerator, we have an oven, we have a toaster, we have a microwave, we have all this stuff plugged in, and it creates an electromagnetic smog. And sometimes when we get
Mm,
really tired and we're struggling to cook, or we're getting, tired at our desk, sometimes it's the stagnant electromagnetic energy that's in the space. So I always try to open a window and get fresh air flowing in and out of the kitchen. And then you just have to like get your mindset right. So I always set an intention. And especially if I'm cooking for an event or for somebody and I know they really need something, I tell the food how I want it to perform. That's a great
mm.
tip for like Thanksgiving or dinner parties is on Thanksgiving, I always talk to the turkey and I always say, I need you to be perfect. I need you to be the best turkey that these people have ever had in their life. I need when I pull you out of the oven that you're just completely done. Easy peasy. Like I tell the food how I want it to perform, how I want the clients to react when they eat it. And I find that when I do that, the people end up telling me exactly the intention I set. So they'll tell me, oh my God, this meal feels like the biggest hug and like someone really loves me. And that would be the intention that I set when I was making the meal.
I
So
love that.
it's a really fun experiment. Like it's like the joy and the laughter
Mhm.
with the brownies. It's like you set the intention and then you see how they react. Sometimes you forget and then they'll tell you how the food is making them feel. And you're like, oh my gosh, the synchronicity. It's so much fun. It's food. Like we need to bring back the fun. And I
Yeah.
think because our food system's gotten so complicated and we've had to like be so focused on what we're choosing to eat, uh, we've lost the fun and joy. So again, the 80-20 rule, we all need to bring it into our life. Um, and we all need to bring a little bit more play into the kitchen or when we're sitting down to eat a meal.
Okay, this conversation has been so fun and I love this so much. I'm going to play with this and I'm excited to go to the grocery store. This is exactly what I wanted. So thank you for
Yeah.
fulfilling my needs and nourishing me on a mental and emotional and spiritual level. So you own Starseed Kitchen. Can you talk a little bit about one, where people can find you,
Yeah.
how they can follow up with you, and just a little bit about Starseed Kitchen before we wrap everything up?
Thank you. Well, you guys can always find me on Instagram at Whitney Aronoff and at Starseed Kitchen. And then I have my own line of organic spice blends, which I've actually been making for over 20 years, long before I was a chef. But once I learned how important organic spices and herbs are, I wanted to make sure that I shared my family recipes with people at like an optimal level, and then added additional touches to make sure that there's a vibrational match for you or that it's kind of raising your vibration as you choose to cook with it, because I can't necessarily cook for everybody, even though I want to.
I want
And
you to cook for me.
I want to cook for you too now in Austin. My goodness. So I sell my spice blends at all the Erewhon locations in LA and then on my website, starseedkitchen.com. And Starseed Kitchen's really a place where I'm just helping to educate people about food and the transfer of energy and what high vibration foods are and how we nourish our physical, emotional, spiritual, and mental bodies. And I continue that conversation on my podcast as well, High Vibration Living Podcast, because it's going to take more than just food to help us like feel balanced and good in our body. And I feel like a lot of this information, just like I know you believe, it's like everyone deserves to know this stuff. We should all have all the tools we need so we can thrive and go out and pursue whatever niche is our calling.
So good. Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been such a fun conversation. I get lit up being able to connect with people where you can just feel their passion and feel their excitement for what they're doing. And so for everybody listening, definitely go follow Whitney on Instagram. We're going to link everything in the show notes as well. And this has just been so much fun.